In a small Nintendo card factory in Kyoto, 1965, a young electronics graduate named Gunpei Yokoi was hired for a simple task: maintaining assembly line machinery for handmade playing cards. He wasn't a designer or an executive, but inside that quiet workshop, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the scent of ink, Japan's greatest toy maker was about to be born. Over the next 3 decades, Yokoi would transform Nintendo from a Hanafuda card company into the king of video game history. He pioneered inventions like the Ultra Hand, then carried that same creative spark into video games, designing the iconic Game & Watch handheld, the original Game Boy, and producing franchises like Metroid and Kid Icarus, while mentoring legends like Shigeru Miyamoto. His guiding philosophy was simple but revolutionary: that fun matters more than power, and that great ideas often come from simple tools, and he called it lateral thinking with withered technology. But his story is not only one of triumph, it is also a story of risk, of daring innovation, and of a brilliant mind lost far too soon. This is the story of Gunpei Yokoi, one of the masterminds behind Nintendo's legacy. Gunpei Yokoi was born in Kyoto, Japan, on September 10, 1941, and from a young age, he showed a natural curiosity for tinkering. He loved taking apart gadgets and understanding how they worked, but most importantly, he imagined how fun they could be. After graduating from Doshisha University with a degree in electronics, Yokoi joined Nintendo in 1965. At the time, Nintendo wasn't the gaming titan that we know today. It was just a small, modest company producing Hanafuda playing cards, with only the faintest ambition of entering the toy market. Yokoi's job was to repair the factory's production equipment, a respectable but simple position for him. One day in 1966, fate intervened. While performing maintenance at the factory, Yokoi built a toy for himself, a simple extendable arm made from plastic joints. And initially, it wasn't meant for sale. It was just a fun way to pass the time. But when Hiroshi Yamauchi, Nintendo's tough and visionary president, visited the plant, he noticed the contraption and immediately saw potential. He then ordered Yokoi to polish it up and prepare it for the upcoming holiday season, and that toy became the Ultra Hand. And it was a smash hit, selling over 1 million units, and single-handedly launched Nintendo's toy division. And from that moment on, Gunpei Yokoi was no longer the guy who just fixed machines. He was the machine, Nintendo's creative engine, and over the next several years, he designed hit after hit. The Ultra Machine, which was a baseball pitching toy, then the Love Tester, which was a playful romance meter for couples, followed up by the 10 billion barrel puzzle. He even invented a miniature remote control vacuum cleaner called the Chiritori. Each invention captured his core philosophy, using simple, affordable technology in clever, delightful ways. By the early 1970s, Yokoi was Nintendo's star inventor, and his creations kept the company afloat. But soon, an entirely new toy would call to him. One not powered by springs and gears, but by circuits and light. In 1973, Nintendo began experimenting with electronic shooting systems, precursors to arcade cabinets, and Yokoi was there at the forefront, helping design innovations like the laser clay shooting system, which was a projection-based shooting gallery installed in bowling alleys across Japan. And these early projects introduced Yokoi to electronic gameplay, setting the stage for his next big leap. In those same early years, Yokoi also played a role in identifying and nurturing other future legends within Nintendo. When a young engineer named Genyo Takeda applied to the company, it was Yokoi who interviewed him. Takeda was fascinated by interactive circuits and game logic, skills that perfectly complemented Yokoi's mechanical ingenuity. Yokoi brought him on board, and together they helped steer Nintendo's first steps into electronic gaming. Takeda would go on to pioneer battery-packed save technology, and later lead hardware design for consoles like the Nintendo 64 and the Wii. During their partnership, Yokoi's eye for playful design and Takeda's talent for hardware quietly laid the foundation for the Nintendo we actually know today. But Yokoi's most influential mentoring came in 1981, when a young artist named Shigeru Miyamoto was struggling to design an arcade game based on Popeye. When Nintendo lost the rights to the license, Miyamoto was left with a half-finished idea, and he didn't really have a clear direction. But rather than scrapping the project, Yokoi encouraged him to just refocus, to think in terms of simple, readable gameplay loops rather than complex mechanics. Yokoi also reviewed Miyamoto's earliest sketches and suggested how to make them more practical for the arcade hardware during that time. And through Yokoi's guidance, Miyamoto learned pacing, difficulty curves, and the psychology of player reward, lessons that would define his entire career. The result was Donkey Kong, released in July of 1981, a cultural hit that introduced Mario to the world and established Nintendo as a serious force in arcades and gaming. And while Miyamoto became the face of Nintendo's creative renaissance, Yokoi was the quiet architect behind the breakthrough. His mentorship didn't just shape one game, it shaped the designer who would later define the company's entire legacy. Then came the next big innovation. In 1979, during a train ride on a Shinkansen, Yokoi noticed a bored businessman mindlessly pressing buttons on a pocket calculator, and that moment sparked an idea. What if a tiny handheld device could double as a tiny game machine? And that thought became the Game & Watch, released in 1980. Using a cheap LCD screen and a simple microchip, similar to the ones found in calculators, Yokoi created a portable gaming device that also displayed the time. It was elegant, affordable, and addictive. Each unit featured a single game, from ball to parachute to fire. And to make the controls compact yet intuitive, Yokoi invented something new. Something everyone's probably heard before, but had no idea who the inventor was. He invented the D-pad, or the directional pad. And this invention would go on to define console gaming for decades. Honestly, still today. The Game & Watch sold over 40 million units and turned Nintendo into a major global player. But more importantly, it introduced Yokoi's defining design philosophy. The Nintendo way is not to chase cutting-edge technology, but to use familiar technology in new ways. In essence, Yokoi believed that fun doesn't need to be expensive. Mature, well-understood technology was reliable, cheap, and if used creatively, it could bring joy to millions. By the late 1980s, Nintendo had conquered the home console market with the Famicom and the NES. But there was still another frontier to own: portable gaming. And Yokoi's R&D team set out to build a new handheld, one that could play interchangeable cartridges, not just single titles. During that time, competitors like Sega's Game Gear and the Atari's Lynx were going for color screens and high performance. But Yokoi stayed true to his philosophy. Keep it simple, keep it cheap, and keep it fun. And in 1989, the Game Boy was born. It had a green and black screen, no color or crazy specs, but it was light, durable, and the battery life was incredible. Paired with Tetris, the Game Boy became an instant global sensation, selling more than 100 million units worldwide. And no, it wasn't the most powerful device, but it didn't need to be. It was accessible, it was fun, and it was Nintendo. Under Yokoi's leadership, the R&D team also developed some of the company's most beloved franchises: Metroid, Kid Icarus, Fire Emblem, and early handheld Mario titles like Super Mario Land. These weren't just games, they were experiments in tone, pacing, and atmosphere that set new standards for storytelling and gameplay on limited hardware. But unfortunately, Mr. Yokoi's next invention didn't really go as planned. In 1995, Gunpei Yokoi unveiled his next ambitious project, the Virtual Boy. Marketed as the world's first true 3D gaming console, it used twin LED displays to create a stereoscopic effect that simulated depth, a remarkable idea years ahead of its time. But the product was compromised long before it reached store shelves. Behind the scenes, the hardware's red monochrome display wasn't Yokoi's original vision. Early prototypes featured full color, but Nintendo's upper management, under pressure to push new hardware before the Nintendo 64 launch, cut the budget and rushed production, and Yokoi wanted more time. The result was a device that was fascinating in theory, but flawed in experience. The technology was limited, the red visuals strained players' eyes, and the unit's tabletop headset made long play sessions very uncomfortable. The marketing didn't really help either. The virtual reality revolution Nintendo promised was a far cry from what gamers actually got. Critics were confused, consumers disappointed, and the Virtual Boy sold fewer than 800,000 units worldwide before quietly being discontinued less than a year later. And yet, despite the internet myth that followed, the Virtual Boy was not what drove Gunpei Yokoi from Nintendo. According to his longtime colleague, Yoshihiro Taki, Yokoi had already planned to retire at around the age of 50, wanting to pursue new projects outside of the corporate structure he'd served for over 3 decades, and he'd actually discussed leaving years before the Virtual Boy even shipped. In fact, Yokoi never intended the system to release in its final form. Author Dave Sheff later wrote in his book titled Game Over that Nintendo executives eager to shift resources to the Nintendo 64 pushed the Virtual Boy right out the door despite Yokoi's reservations. His vision of the Virtual Boy was just a proof of concept. It wasn't supposed to be an actual console. So while the gaming world saw the Virtual Boy as a failure, Yokoi saw a lesson, one that reinforced his lifelong belief. Innovation means risk, and not every experiment will succeed. When he left Nintendo on August 15, 1996, it wasn't an exile. It was a farewell on his own terms. And Gunpei Yokoi would go on to found Koto Laboratory, joined by several trusted colleagues, and immediately began collaborating with Bandai on a new handheld system called the Wonder Swan, a machine that embodied his lateral thinking philosophy. But sadly, it would also be his last. On October 4th, 1997, while driving on the Hokuriku Expressway, Yokoi's car collided with a truck. He and his passenger stepped out to inspect the damage, and moments later, a passing car struck them. Tragically, Gunpei Yokoi, age 56 at the time, was killed. The gaming world was stunned. Nintendo had lost a guiding mind. Japan lost one of its greatest inventors. And at his funeral, Shigeru Miyamoto, the man Yokoi had once mentored, designed his tombstone and delivered a heartfelt eulogy. It listed every major creation of his career, from the Ultra Hand to the Game Boy. A quiet monument to a life defined by play. Afterwards, Yokoi's spirit continued to inspire. His team at Bandai finished the Wonder Swan, releasing it in 1999, and it became a modest success, a final echo of his genius. In 2003, Gunpei Yokoi was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the International Game Developers Association. Books, documentaries, and tributes also followed, calling him the father of gaming and Nintendo's DNA. Even with the Nintendo Wii, released nearly a decade after his death, embodied his design philosophy, using affordable technology in unexpected, joyful ways. And the late Satoru Iwata once said that Nintendo's entire creative DNA still carries through Yokoi's influence. And every handheld, from the DS to the Switch, owes its existence to his principles. Gunpei Yokoi's life was masterclass in imagination. He wasn't a man of spectacle or ego. He was an engineer, a craftsman, and a believer in the magic of simple ideas. He taught Nintendo and the entire gaming world that technology isn't what makes gaming special. The people and the creativity do. His inventions changed childhoods, shaped generations, and proved that limitations are not barriers. They're opportunities for innovation. So the next time you pick up a Game Boy, a Switch, or any other handheld Nintendo device built for fun and portability, just remember, we're holding a piece of his legacy. Gunpei Yokoi may be gone, but every button we press still echoes with his spirit. What was your favorite Game Boy memory growing up? Drop a comment down below. Also, if you enjoy deep dives into gaming history, like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a future upload. This is West Coast Ninja signing out. I will see you in the next video.